The first time Maria heard the words, she was 7 years old, clutching her mother's hand as they stood in line at the grocery store. The woman in front of them turned sharply, her voice dripping with disdain as she sneered at Maria's mother for fumbling with her English. "Go back to your country," she spat, before snapping her head forward, satisfied with her cruelty. Maria didn't understand the weight of the words then, but she saw how her mother's hand tightened, the knuckles paling, the soft brown skin going rigid with suppressed emotion. Years would pass before Maria truly understood, but the memory never left her, it only simmered, building into something sharper, something resilient. Maria grew up in the same town where those words followed her like shadows, whispers that spilled from the lips of classmates, murmurs she caught from across parking lots, gas stations, and cafeterias. Her mother, ever dignified, always smiled through it, her voice gentle and accented, her hands never idle, always folding, cooking, working. "We are stronger than their words," her mother would say in Spanish, smoothing back Maria's curls with a tenderness that defied the harshness of the world outside their small apartment. 1. Maria took those words to heart. She excelled in school, mastering the English language with a precision that astonished her teachers. While others saw her as a statistic, just another immigrant kid destined to fade into obscurity, Maria saw herself as more. She devoured books, stayed late after school for debate club, and practiced speeches in the mirror until her pronunciation was flawless, her voice clear and commanding. Words would not be her enemy, they would be her weapon. It was during her final year of high school when everything changed. Maria had been selected as valedictorian, the first Latina student to do so in her school's history. Her mother wept with pride, clutching the letter in her hands as if it were made of gold. Maria felt a fire burn in her chest, one that threatened to consume her if she didn't use it. She knew what she had to do, her speech would be her stage, her words the hammer to break the silence that had shrouded her family for too long. The day of the graduation came with a heavy sky, thick with clouds that promised rain. The auditorium bustled with anticipation, students fidgeting in their caps and gowns, families craning their necks to catch glimpses of their children. Maria stood backstage, smoothing the fabric of her robe, the speech clasped in her hands. Her mother sat near the front, beaming with pride, flanked by women from their community who had come to watch Maria defy the odds. When her name was called, the applause was polite but restrained. Maria stepped up to the podium, her heart hammering in her chest. She looked out over the crowd, scanning the faces of those who had doubted her, dismissed her, and whispered behind her back. Her eyes settled on a cluster of parents, their expressions skeptical, arms crossed. One of them was the woman from the grocery store all those years ago. Time had weathered her features, but Maria recognized the eyes, the same eyes that had burned with contempt for her mother's broken English. Maria took a breath, her hands steady as she unfolded her speech. "When I first came to this country, I was 7 years old," she began, her voice carrying through the auditorium with a clarity that silenced the whispers. "I was told that I didn't belong, that I should go back to my country." A ripple moved through the crowd, a murmur of discomfort. Maria did not flinch. "But I stayed. I learned. And I worked harder than I ever thought possible, because I knew that words are only as powerful as the truth behind them." Her gaze shifted to her mother, whose eyes shimmered with tears, pride etched into every line of her face. "I am the daughter of an immigrant. I am the product of sacrifice and perseverance. And I am proof that language is not a barrier, it is a bridge." Her voice grew stronger, her hands clutching the sides of the podium. "For every time someone told me to go back to my country, I studied harder. I wrote longer. I spoke louder. Because this country is as much mine as it is yours." The silence in the auditorium was absolute. Maria's eyes locked with the woman from the grocery store, whose face had gone pale, eyes wide with disbelief. Maria did not look away. "And to those who still believe I do not belong, I ask you, where would you have me go? For I am already home." The room erupted into applause, a sound that shook the very walls of the building. Her mother sobbed openly, clutching the hands of the women beside her, their faces bright with joy. Maria stood tall, her heart soaring, the weight of years of whispers and sneers lifting from her shoulders like dust blown away by the wind. But just as the applause began to settle, the principal stepped forward, his face drawn and pale. He leaned into the microphone, his voice shaking slightly as he spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid there has been an incident. We have just been informed that the immigration authorities are conducting operations in our community. Several families have been detained, and," he paused, his eyes flickering to Maria's mother in the front row. "Some of our students' families are being affected." A hush fell over the crowd, disbelief and fear rippling through the audience. Maria's heart stopped. Her eyes darted to her mother, whose hands were now clasped tightly in her lap, her face drained of color. The women around her murmured in Spanish, their voices laced with panic. Maria's fists clenched at her sides. She stepped back from the podium, the applause now a distant memory, replaced by whispers of fear and uncertainty. And in that moment, Maria understood, the fight was not over. Her voice had reached them, yes, but there were those who still held power, who still sought to silence and diminish. As she stepped off the stage, her mother's eyes met hers, filled with both pride and terror. Maria walked forward, head held high, her heart a drumbeat of determination. The moment the principal's announcement settled in the air, chaos erupted. Mothers scrambled for their phones, whispers turned to panicked shouts, and Maria's mother sat frozen, her eyes glassy and unblinking. Maria rushed to her side, grabbing her hands, feeling the tremor that pulsed through her mother's fingertips. "Tenemos que irnos," she whispered, her voice cracking under the weight of urgency. But her mother did not move. Her gaze was fixed on something, or someone, at the back of the auditorium. Maria turned, her breath catching in her throat. Two men in dark suits, stone-faced, stood by the double doors, scanning the crowd with clinical detachment. One of them raised a hand to his ear, speaking into a hidden device. Maria's pulse thundered in her ears. "They're here," she whispered, more to herself than to her mother. "We have to go. Now." Gripping her mother's hand, Maria pushed through the panicked crowd, her mind racing. This wasn't just an immigration raid, this felt different. Targeted. The way the men scanned the room, how they lingered when their eyes met hers, it felt like they were waiting for her to make a move. Bursting through the side doors, Maria led her mother into the parking lot, weaving between cars as voices shouted behind them. She glanced over her shoulder. The men were following, their strides long and deliberate. "Get in the car," she yelled, yanking the passenger door open and practically pushing her mother inside. She scrambled around to the driver's side, her hands shaking as she jammed the key into the ignition. The car sputtered once before roaring to life. Maria slammed her foot on the gas, the tires screeching as they peeled out of the lot. Her mother clutched the dashboard, knuckles white, eyes wide with fear. "¿Qué está pasando, Maria?" she asked, voice trembling. Maria's hands gripped the wheel, her eyes darting between the rearview mirror and the road ahead. "I don't know, but it's not just ICE. Those men, they're something else." Her mind flashed back to the principal's face, the way he'd looked directly at her mother when he spoke. It wasn't an accident. It was a warning. They drove in silence for miles, the highway stretching endlessly before them. Maria's mind churned, piecing together fragments of conversations, whispers she'd brushed off as paranoia. Her mother had been talking about strange cars parked on their street for weeks. She had dismissed it, chalking it up to nerves. But now, her phone buzzed, jolting her back to the present. She glanced at the screen. A message from an unknown number, "You shouldn't have spoken." Her heart dropped. She showed the screen to her mother, whose face went pale. "¿Qué significa eso?" she whispered. "It means they are watching," Maria replied, her voice barely above a whisper. But who were they? Immigration? The government? Or something worse? Her mind raced back to the stories she'd heard, the ones whispered at family gatherings, spoken in hushed voices. Stories of people who spoke out and were never heard from again. People who challenged the system and disappeared. Another message flashed on her screen. "If you want answers, come alone." Midnight. Old steel mill. Her mother saw the message and immediately shook her head. "No. Es una trampa." Maria hesitated, fear warring with something stronger, rage. 4 years, they had been silenced, told to stay in the shadows, to keep their heads down and accept whatever was thrown their way. But not anymore. Not after today. "I have to go," she said, voice firm. Her mother's eyes filled with tears, but she did not argue. She knew that fire in her daughter's eyes. It was the same fire that had kept their family alive through war, through poverty, through every door slammed in their faces. That night, Maria drove alone to the old steel mill, its jagged silhouette rising against the night sky like a broken tooth. The air was heavy with the scent of rust and decay, the silence oppressive. Her footsteps echoed as she stepped inside, the darkness swallowing her whole. A single light flickered to life in the center of the cavernous room, casting long shadows across the concrete. And there, standing beneath its glow, was the woman from the grocery store, the same woman who had told her mother to go back to her country all those years ago. But she looked different now, sharper, colder, eyes glittering with something predatory. "You finally showed up," the woman said, her voice smooth and unhurried. She reached into her coat and pulled out a badge, flashing it in the dim light. The insignia was not familiar, no agency Maria had ever seen. "We have much to discuss," she continued, a smile creeping onto her lips. "You think it's just about immigration, don't you?" "Oh, Maria, it's so much bigger than that." Before Maria could respond, the lights flickered once more, and figures emerged from the shadows, men in suits, their faces blank and expressionless. They lined the room in silence, forming a perimeter. Maria's pulse hammered in her ears, but she held her ground, fists clenched at her sides. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice steady. The woman's smile grew wider. "The truth. And you're going to help us find it." The lights snapped off, plunging the room into darkness. Maria felt hands seize her arms, pulling her back into the shadows as her voice echoed in the empty space. And then, silence. Maria's body was yanked into the cold, oppressive darkness. She struggled, her heart pounding as her hands reached out, desperate for something to grab onto. But the darkness was absolute. The air felt thick, suffocating, as though it were pressing in on her from all sides. She fought to free herself, but the grip on her arms was unrelenting. "Let go of me," she screamed, her voice cutting through the silence, but the words barely seemed to matter in this space, swallowed up by the oppressive blackness. She twisted, kicking out, but her efforts were futile. Her movements were sluggish as if the air itself were dragging her down. A sharp voice sliced through the darkness, chilling her to the bone. "Don't bother. You're not going anywhere." Maria's stomach dropped. The woman's voice was calm, almost patronizing, as though Maria were nothing more than a minor inconvenience in her path. The grip on her arms loosened slightly, and for the briefest moment, Maria had an opportunity to break free. But before she could make a move, she felt a cold metal click against her wrist, handcuffs. "You think you're special, don't you?" the woman continued, her voice now barely above a whisper, but cutting through the dark like a knife. "All that talk about redemption, about breaking barriers. But you don't know the truth. None of you do." Maria's mind raced, but she kept her mouth shut. She could feel the woman's gaze on her, cold and calculating, and for the first time, Maria realized just how far-reaching the game had become. The walls that had held her family captive, were they more than just the result of prejudice? Had this been engineered, manipulated from the shadows? "I don't care about your lies," Maria spat. "I'll never help you." The woman's laughter echoed around them, hollow and cruel. "You don't have a choice." She paused. "You think your story is unique? That your fight is the first of its kind? You're just a pawn in a much larger game, Maria. A game you've already lost." Maria's heart stopped. The walls seemed to close in around her as her thoughts spiraled. "What game? What are you talking about? Come with me. We'll show you." The sound of footsteps echoed through the cavernous space, and the woman turned, leading Maria deeper into the darkness. The handcuffs bit into her wrists as they walked, but Maria held her ground, determined not to show fear. They stopped before a large steel door, its surface cold and uninviting. The woman's hand hovered over a keypad, and Maria could hear the faint sound of keys being pressed. The door slid open with a mechanical groan, revealing a dimly lit room beyond. It was empty except for one thing, a single, large screen mounted on the wall. The woman motioned toward the screen. "Watch." Maria's stomach churned as the screen flickered to life. At first, it was a blur of static. But then, a face appeared on the screen, one she knew all too well. It was her mother. Maria's breath caught in her throat as her mother's image flickered, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. "What is this?" Maria demanded, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Your mother is an integral part of the system you're fighting against," the woman said, her words cutting into Maria like a shard of glass. "She's been playing both sides all along. She's not just an innocent immigrant. She's a key player in a network that controls everything, the government, the media, the very policies you thought were there to help." Maria's world seemed to spin. Her mother? No. It couldn't be. "You're lying," she hissed. "My mother would never do that." The woman's eyes gleamed with cold satisfaction. "You were right about one thing. Your family is special. Your mother isn't just a pawn, Maria. She's the queen." The words hit Maria like a physical blow. She stumbled back, her mind racing. Everything she had fought for, everything she had believed in, had it all been a lie? Had her mother known more than she had ever let on? The woman watched Maria carefully, her expression unreadable. "You think this is a game, but the truth is, Maria, your mother, your family, has been orchestrating this for years. The stories, the struggles, the suffering, it's all part of the plan." Maria's pulse roared in her ears. She couldn't breathe. The screen flickered again, showing her mother standing in front of a group of well-dressed men. She was speaking, her words low and deliberate. Maria couldn't hear the conversation, but the scene was unmistakable. Her mother was in on something huge. Something dangerous. "This is what you've been fighting all along," the woman said, her voice thick with triumph. "It's not just about immigration. It's not about helping people. It's about control. And your mother is at the center of it." The world around Maria spun. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. "No." The woman's expression softened just a fraction, as if almost pitying Maria's disbelief. "You'll understand soon enough. The question is, what will you do when you find out the truth? Will you fight against the system that's been pulling the strings all this time? Or will you join them?" Maria's world seemed to shatter in that moment. Her heart ached as the realization set in. Her mother, the woman who had raised her, had been a part of the very system Maria had spent her life trying to expose. But Maria wasn't ready to give up, not yet. She took a deep breath, her voice steady but filled with defiance. "I'll never join you." The woman smiled, a cold, cruel smile. "We'll see." The lights above flickered one last time before the room went black, the screen shutting off with a loud click. Then, from the darkness, Maria heard the unmistakable sound of a door opening, and the cold metal click of more handcuffs.